esta mesa redonda virtual, donde lo que queremos es iniciar un diálogo desde España, pero un diálogo entre España y África, esta vez sí virtual, alrededor de un partenariado vital para nuestro país.
Good afternoon to you. We are here at the presentation of Africa, Focus Africa 2023. We would like to now take our relationship with Africa more.
Today is an important day for us in Spain. It's the launch of our initiative, Focus Africa 2023, with which we want to work on a true partnership between Africa and Spain. This partnership has multiple dimensions because this is what the countries in the regions and in the continent of Africa are telling us they want. It's first and foremost a partnership on peace and stability. It's a partnership on the global public goods of fighting against diseases, ensuring access to water and sanitation. It is a partnership also on empowering women and girls. It's a partnership to drive more Spanish investments and businesses into the African continent. And it is, and this is the purpose of this roundtable, a partnership about economic development that is sustainable, that is inclusive, and that builds on the assets that exist in the African continent and in Spain. This is the sense of Focus Africa 2023. It's a partnership, meaning working together to leverage our strengths, to work on our assets, to ensure we leave no one behind. We were very lucky this morning to have the President of Ghana join the Prime Minister of Spain in launching Focus Africa 2023. This afternoon we want to unpack two dimensions, the economic dimension as well as the women and girls empowerment dimension, for which we have amazing speakers, participants. Unfortunately, I can see already some in the screen. Hello, Vera, and great to have you with us in this conversation. We wish we could have you physically with us. We wish we could be physically with you, but we are going to be working hard over the next months to make sure that the next meeting is a meeting in presence. Thank you again, and I leave you now in the good hands of Xiana. Xiana, she's the Secretary of State for International Trade in the Spanish government, and the person that will drive the conversation on the economic aspects of Focus Africa 2023. With this, thank you very much, and thanks a lot to our participants online.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Minister. It's an honor for me to be here to participate in the launch of Focus Africa. Jaime, Director General of the Chamber of Commerce Spain, Marta. He is the President of CEOE International. To the participants from Africa and all of the representatives from international organizations, from the private sector, the world of academia, civil society, everyone. Dear friends, let me say first of all how delighted I am to be here, to be part of this event, Focus Africa 2023, which is all about the way we want to be a strategic partner for Africa. In all of the different dimensions of our relationship with the continent, these are bonds that we want to like to strengthen even more in the next few years. Africa, as we know, has tremendous economic potential that the European Union has decided to develop, and Spain is ready and willing to contribute to this experience, the experience of its economic operators, its human resources, its financial resources. The government of Spain is convinced that Africa can become an area of fast economic growth. It already is in the case of its relationship with Europe, and that will, of course, lead to more robust growth for Europe and for Spain. African countries, despite their heterogeneous nature, do share similar challenges with regard to economic and social development, the eradication of poverty, the the defense of peace and safe and security, defense also of the welfare of the population, as well as empowerment of women. These are similar dimensions for us in Europe. The health crisis, as in the rest of the world, has led to a shrinkage of GDP and has also worsened public health problems. However, overall, Africa seems to have suffered a less severe economic crisis than in other parts of the world, with a downturn in the GDP of 2.1% in 2020, and with an outlook for growth in 2021 for North Africa of 4.9% and for 3% for sub-Saharan Africa. Our economic and commercial relationship has also been consolidated over recent years, especially over the last 10 years. Bilateral trade between Spain and Africa has also become more and more relevant. In fact, Spanish exports have doubled over the last 20 years. Indeed, one significant figure for 2019, the exports from Spain to Africa were more than 18.5 billion euros. That is more than all of the exports that we make to Latin America, which is a region where Spain has always been very much present, with a footprint there of Spanish company. Of course, 2020 was a year that suffered from the pandemic, but nevertheless, with this favorable progression in international trade, Spain is quite clearly underrepresented with regards to investment in Africa. So it's not just trade, but investment. It's important to understand that those trade flows that have been growing and consolidating over recent years are bringing an increase of the permanent presence of Spanish companies in Africa. The idea is that a long-term commitment on the part of our Spanish companies in Africa. Following the example of some of our European partners, of course, and putting as an issue on the agenda those sectors, those projects that also match the economic development initiatives in African countries. For instance, energy infrastructure, water, energy, and all different projects that can increase the overall welfare level and growth. So it's important for us to reinforce our economic position in Africa through the private enterprise and through the public sector. So with that aim in mind, the Spanish Ministry of Industry, Trade and Tourism has recently launched a commercial strategy. It's a financial strategy too for Africa called Horizon Africa. It is fully comprehensive. The strategy is based on identifying countries and sectors through the information that is sent to us from our economic and trade officers in the continent and from companies that already have experiences on the ground in those countries, including concrete measures for public support, institutional support, financial support that will help to reinforce the competitive edge of exports and Spanish invest in the region. Horizon Africa also identifies key industries that, as I said before, will be propitious for economic and sustainable growth in the countries and potentially will be able to provide traction to also bring Spanish companies to have a footprint there. In general, there is also a reinforcement of financial instruments and utilization of human resources in our offices there. We also hope there will be a strategic contribution to the Focused Africa goals that we'll be presenting today. We, in addition, will have a regular agenda of institutional visits to the countries included in the strategy. That will also be key as we move forward. So as we look ahead to the challenges that are facing the African continent, Spain has set out to be a strategic partner in dialogue in the different areas of our relationship. And quite obviously, we want to strengthen our bonds with the continent and contribute with our experience to the sustainable economic development of Africa. We're absolutely convinced that this will be beneficial for both the African continent and Spain. Let me switch now to English for the roundtable session. It will be a very interesting roundtable session. We'll be looking at the different opportunities and possibilities for trade in Africa and all of those opportunities for Spanish companies.
Honor to share in this event this opportunity with these 6 excellent panelists. And before we start, I would like to thank all the participants for being part of this roundtable focused on the trade and investment opportunities that Africa has to offer, and also the huge potential for the development that comes with these opportunities. And to this end, I will start with Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. Hello, Vera, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today with us, and I would be really grateful if you could please share with us your insights about the opportunities that investors can find in Africa, emphasizing the opportunities that come through collaboration with local partners and also different stakeholders in the region, along with the challenges that the pandemic is posing to African countries.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Perfectly.
Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I don't know, I cannot see the room, so let me say it's always a pleasure to be here with my former colleague and now the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs. And of course, Spain has always been a good friend of Africa, but it's even much more of a friend when we have a friend that we all know there. And no surprise that we're talking about business. And some people will wonder why we're talking about business and business collaboration in the middle of a pandemic. But I think that the COVID-19 crisis, from the PPEs to the vaccines, has shown us that we need business more than ever before to make sure that our economies can open again, both from the production of PPEs to the production of vaccines. At the end of the day, it is the businesses that produce these things, and we need to make sure that we can bring them into the space. And I think this is important because part of the discussion in another meeting that I just left is a discussion around framing, the liquidity and debt crisis. And we at the Economic Commission for Africa, and most of Africa, have been saying we need liquidity, we need access to more foreign currency, we need access to reserves so that we can actually shore up our capital markets. We can make sure that banks can continue to on-lend to SMEs that are the ones who are going to create the growth and the jobs and deliver an economy that builds forward better. So I think for Africa, what are we looking for from Spain? We're looking, first of all, I think the Economic Commission for Africa, and I'll put this report at your disposal, has just finished a report on building forward better. We say 3 things in that report. First of all, as we talk about business, the most important thing before we go forward is to make sure that there is a response. We must respond to the crisis. And I think with Spain being part of the G20 and the G7, we need some additional liquidity. We need to see how we can get liquidity to the private sector. The Economic Commission for Africa has proposed the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility that lowers the cost of borrowing. It's one thing to talk about debt, but we talk about debt because the cost of borrowing is high. If African countries go to the markets at 6, 7, 8%, then of course we will become debt unsustainable in 2.5 years. We need to be able to go to the markets like Spain and Italy at 4.8, especially when we have lower for longer interest rates and even negative interest rates in some spaces. So that's the response. Extension of the DSSI so that public sector can take care of social safety needs. A creation of this liquidity facility, give us some liquidity so that private sector can continue to build its capital, can import, has the forex exchange that is needed to continue. In the response, and this is where Spain becomes even. So Spain, we need Spain on the public sector side for DSSI and LSF. On the private sector side, in the response and recovery, we need Spain for the green recovery. Your businesses have extreme experience, both from the small and medium, because most of the time when we talk about the green recovery, one tends to think about big business, big industry. But there is also small industry. There is solar panels. There is all the work that Spain has done in terms of a green auto and rail and transport systems. How do we do that better? We can learn better from Spain. In terms of a green agricultural sector, the Spanish businesses know how to do that, are moving towards that, are getting support, and I think there is space there for an exchange. Africa is a huge green field. but we need to do even our agriculture better. We need to do our agriculture differently. And I think there is room for collaboration there as well. We have just passed this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which means essentially that when Spanish businesses come onto the continent, and again, the minister has been an instrumental part of this process, but when Spanish businesses come to the continent, they come to 1.3 billion people, huge markets. And when we talk about business, we cannot forget to talk about businesses that are run by women, where we need financing. You and I are women. We know that women still have a difficulty in Spain and in Africa getting access to financing. Can we collectively come together, use our collective voices to say, you know, how do we get more resources to women? At the Economic Commission for Africa, we started the Women's Fund of Funds to see how we can create a fund system that allows women to decide which women businesses they give resources to. So we can grow more women businesses in the petrochemical sectors. We've seen with the vaccines, we need more women businesses in the pharmaceutical sector. We don't have enough. Maybe we can have joint collaborations with yourselves. And then finally, one area where we believe that we can have a lot more collaboration as well is in digitization, of course. But in that area, we talk about a global reset. And again, Spain can be important, both at the sort of global level, but also at the enterprise level, in terms of how we can, there is a lot more. We now see that we can do telemedicine from home. We can do restaurant businesses from home. We can do fashion from home. We can design and deploy from home. And I think, again, there is collaboration there between, you know, Spanish artists, the huge artists this year in the African Union. We have declared it the year of culture and arts. And I think there, again, there is a lot of space, I think, for joint collaboration between yourselves and ourselves to see how we can use that service sector with the CFTA, the logistics sector, accounting and all that, to see women can do well, and they can do well in those businesses. Now I'm talking about women, but in general businesses. But of course, we want more women businesses into the system. So we believe that there is a lot of room for Spain and Africa in general to do more, to do better. Spain has lost some ground in terms of trade with Africa, but we believe that with the CFTA, and especially if we focus on this women-to-women niche, there is room to be able to come back. So we hope that we see you again, and that as we launch the CFTA, we can work even more stronger with Spain. You are our neighbor, literally. So we hope that collectively we can move forward in recovering better together, as we have seen with the COVID crisis. It's a global world. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. We love that you talk about women. We love it. We'll talk more about it with the minister in the second roundtable too. Very interesting. So you talked about liquidity, a need for liquidity, for sure. Agricultural sector, collaboration on agriculture, on digitalization, arts, women-to-women businesses. Do you have time for another question for you? Going to the sanitary crisis that come with an economic crisis, and that may slow down the impetus for reforms, economic reforms in Africa. In what ways do you think that the Economic Commission for Africa can help African countries to maintain the necessary reforms despite these very difficult times?
Look, that's a very good question. I think that one of the things we must remember is that before the crisis, many African countries were doing well. 75% of the African countries were moving into middle income space. Many countries, over 30 African countries, had access to markets, which begins to show you that they have sound macroeconomic fundamentals. The crisis has set us back. But I think we must remember, any of you who looks at the Doing Business Index, for the last 5 to 7 years before the crisis, African countries were in the top 10, at least 5 of them every year. So Africans had already begun to understand the importance of good economic reforms. Of course, to do good economic reforms, we need more revenues, we need more investments, we need to channel our savings to things that can actually lead to prosperity and lead to more creation of value. We didn't have enough of that. We still need to do a lot more work on domestic resource mobilization. And there I think with Spain, again, we can work together on issues of illicit financial flows. Can we do better together? Can we ensure that, some of those resources are not leaking out of the continent? Africa needs to do its part as well. We need to build better public expenditure management systems. Some countries have done well, but more countries have to do better. So yes, we've done a lot, but I think that there is still more that needs to be done. Then we have a group of crisis countries. And I think there the challenge is to see how can we bring peace. And Spain has been working a lot on our Sahel regions and the Horn of Africa. And we hope that with peace, we will see more growth. And so the reforms there are more of an institutional nature, are more of a nature where you need to create institutions that can get a social contract that provides for peace. But it is very important that we come together around that. And then finally, we need new legislation for climate change and for digitization that is more inclusive. And I think we do need to do a little bit more work on how we build more inclusive societies, growth with equity. But it's a struggle, I believe, that we are all struggling with. And collectively, again, we hope we can get there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vera, for your words. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Same here. I hope we can travel soon. Good luck and stay safe.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Well, we go now to Mr. Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. He has not been able to be here today with us, but he has been kind enough to send a video, and I would like you to watch it now.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to join you as you launch Focus Africa 2023, an initiative which is intended to strengthen the partnership between Spain and Africa. I want to thank my old friend from Geneva, Honorable Minister Arancha González, for inviting me to make a contribution to this very important launch that is taking place today. As you may be aware, Africa launched on the 1st of January 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which today is the largest free trade area in the world. 36 countries out of 55 have ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area. And this free trade area contains and includes some of the fastest growing and most dynamic economies in the world. In the year 2019, before the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 6 were on the African continent. On average, Africa was growing at about 3.5%. Of course, COVID-19 has significantly slowed down the prospects for growth on the African continent, as it has in other parts of the world. However, we believe that through aggressive implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we in Africa will see a recovery that is on the back of liberalized trade in goods, liberalized trade in services, and of course other rules in the area of intellectual property rights, e-commerce, competition policy, and so on. We believe that this agreement creates opportunities for both African and non-African investors. We now have a single rulebook for trade and investment on the African continent. Through the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have created market certainty, market predictability of trade and investment in Africa. I invite you, Spanish investors, to think very carefully and to look at the African continent with a new lens, and the lens of the African Continental Free Trade Area, presenting you with opportunities for investment. We intend that this agreement should expedite industrial development on the African continent, that it should create jobs, that it should enhance investment, and that new investments that come into the African continent will be directed to productive sector investment, to small, medium enterprises that are led primarily by women, and of course, to improve and create opportunities for young people. We have a robust rules of origin regime that was painstakingly negotiated over years, and we are now in a position to implement this rules of origin regime, which we believe will foster industrial development on the African continent. We believe there will be opportunities for investment in manufacturing, in the services area, in financial services, in telecommunication services, in agro-processing, in the automobile sector, and a range of other sectors that will be mutually beneficial to investors and also to the AfCFTA state parties. For the first time, the African continent has a single rulebook for trade and investment in Africa. We also have adopted a protocol on dispute settlement, which is an improvement on the WTO's understanding on dispute settlement. We've looked at rules around the world, rules for resolving investment, trade, and commercial disputes, such as the WTO dispute settlement understanding that I've just referred to, and we've improved on those rules, and we've made them unique to the circumstances of Africa. Through this dispute settlement mechanism, we now are in a position to ensure that the interests of both the investors and the host governments in Africa, that the interests are equally protected, and that the investors going forward will have protections, legal protections over their investments in any of the 36 countries that have ratified the agreement. I very much look forward to working with you to facilitate investment onto AfCFTA state parties. I very much look forward to sharing with you experience on trade facilitating measures, on how we can improve our capacity in implementation of this very, very important trade agreement. I wish to conclude by observing the following. The World Bank has projected that where we implement this agreement effectively, by the year 2015, we have the potential to lift 100 million Africans out of poverty, 70 million Africans out of extreme poverty, 30 million Africans out of moderate poverty. And the main beneficiaries of this upliftment out of poverty will be women, and women who are active in small, medium enterprises, and women who lead their own businesses across borders in Africa. I know that my dear friend, Honorable Minister Arancha González, when she was heading the ITC, championed a program called She Trades, a program which we look to as a model for how we can ensure inclusivity and benefits of trade. I hope to work closely with you, Spanish investors and Spanish industrialists, to make sure that there are mutually beneficial opportunities for investment under the African Continental Free Trade Area. In due course, I hope to join you in Spain in this very important conversation of how to strengthen trade and investment relations with the African continent. And I hope that the African Continental Free Trade Area is actually the tool that both of us can leverage on to improve this very important trade and investment relationship between Spain and the African Continental Free Trade Area. I wish you success in your deliberations, and thank you again for inviting me.
Well, thanks to Mr. Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We are going to talk a little bit more about this initiative, this project. But we move to our next participant, Ms. Betty Maina, Cabinet Secretary. This is Minister, as per our terminology, of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development of the Government of Kenya. Cabinet Secretary Maina, thank you also for being with us. Hello, good afternoon. I would like to also ask you about the opportunities that Kenya, as a key member of the African Continental Free Trade Area, has to offer to international investors, and the benefits for Kenya and these international investors of being part of this initiative, the free trade area.
Okay, good afternoon. I have no idea if you can hear me. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can. We hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to put off my video because I suspect that we have a network connection problem, but I'll try my very best. And the moment you can't hear me, just let me know. I want to thank you very much, Arancha, for the invitation to join in this program, and I want to congratulate you and congratulate Spain for the interest it is demonstrating in Africa, and I wish you well as you reach out. And I want to thank the Spanish investors who have expressed an interest in expanding a presence in Africa. And I think the only message or question we'll ask you is what took you so long? Because you're very close. I think we can swim across to Spain from Africa, but it's a pity that it's taken you this long. But we have a saying in Africa which says your day begins when you wake up. So welcome, and I think you will enjoy the time in Africa, and you are coming at a great time when we are demonstrating, as Vera has said, as Wamkele has said, great interest in regional integration and expansion, and therefore the launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which brings together a market of nearly 1.3 billion people, and with a GDP of more than $3.4 trillion, is a good time, and it's a good day, and it's a good time for you to be demonstrating an interest in Africa. The free trade agreement, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, is really anchored on expansion of industrial production within Africa, and the building up of regional value chains. So Spanish investors are welcome to the continent to not just produce for a single country like Kenya, but actually to produce for the entire continent. Within Kenya, for instance, we have been leaders in this integration journey, having anchored our integration within East Africa, having anchored integration within the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and now being one of the first countries to ratify the Africa Continental Free Trade Areas, the CFTA. We've done this knowing very well that this is what the private sector requires to foster investment. But it isn't just the freedom, tariff-free trading that we are fostering in Africa, but we're really trying to also improve on the ease of doing business and on the ease of trade across borders within the continent. These non-tariff barriers are some of the, I think they are the greatest hindrances to regional trade. But it is our intention, and as countries, to focus on trade facilitation and easing our business as we continue to build on our regional value chains. We recognize that the private sector will be keen, not just in investing in industrial production within the country, but also in investment in infrastructure and in all the related services that make it easier to trade across the African continent. And therefore, we welcome you and businesses that are keen on production, but they're also keen in investment in services. We've talked about COVID earlier. The COVID pandemic has demonstrated the need to localize supply chains for critical commodities. So you will not be surprised to find that in many African countries, building up capacity in medical commodities, building up capacity in pharmaceuticals, building up capacity in testing and related investigations is a key part, and we really welcome Spanish firms to consider and to localize their investment in Africa. And therefore, if I think you can use your embassies in many of the countries to reach out to understand the investment climate in any country of interest. Certainly for us in Kenya, we would welcome additional investment by Spanish firms because it's really very little at present, and direct private sector investment. But we welcome as many of you to consider investing in our countries and taking advantage, not just of this market alone in Africa, but also exporting back to Europe, utilizing the trade and investment agreements that we have reached. You're members of the European Union, and therefore we trade with you under the Economic Partnership Agreement. We are negotiating with other markets, with China, with the US, with the UK. So you actually have Spanish firms have possibilities of not just trading or supplying Africa, but also supplying the rest of the world. So our Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development will have the responsibility of supporting onboarding Spanish firms into Kenya, and we welcome you to consider having your foothold in this country. So I want to thank you very much. Thank Arancha for continuing with this focus, for the work with the women entrepreneurs that you started at ITC and that continues to date. And we welcome and we encourage a lot of our African women to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and to enhance their capacity. I thank you, and I hope you heard me.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Do you have time for a second question on Kenya? Maybe not. I will go now to Spanish, to the next participant, Ibrahim, Mayaki. Déjeme que
If I could, let me switch into Spanish to greet him, representing the African Union, but he speaks perfect Spanish. You can hear me. Good afternoon. Ibrahim Mayaki. You can hear us perfectly, can you? Dr. Mayaki, I know that you are more involved in development, aren't you? Especially development for Africa. Nevertheless, during this panel session, because of the subject matter of it, we would like to hear from you about trade and investment and how they can also be an engine for growth, and they can help us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, on the 2030 agenda, together with the traditional cooperation, which is, of course, valid and crucial to be able to achieve the SDGs, more important than ever before, I think, will be the presence of the private sector to help us reach those goals, to pool efforts, to bring together all stakeholders and economic agents. So your view, with thinking about development, what is the role that should be played by private sector through trade and investment for development in Africa? Thank you very much for your invitation. I don't speak perfect Spanish, but I will do my very best to speak in Spanish to answer. Let me highlight 3 points that I think are key. A lot has already been said by Vera, by Wamkele, and by the minister from Kenya. However, there are 3 points that I would like to underscore. One is that there will be no effective implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area without industrialization. We're very clear about that in the African Union. And the Secretariat, too, of the CFTA is also very clear about that. What we have to do now is to move away from national industrialization policies to regional policies. That is absolutely fundamental, and that quite obviously entails a region-wide dimension for value chains. They must take on that regional approach. The second point I would like to underscore is that there will be no industrialization if we do not promote small and medium-sized enterprises. 80% of employment in Africa is employment in those SMEs, and most of those SMEs, those small and medium-sized enterprises, are operating in an informal sector. This is a challenge for us. It's true. We know that when Bill Gates set up Microsoft, he also started the company as an informal company. So it is possible to transform a company with a very specific, well-defined role to be played by the state. The state has to be there to be at the service of those more informal small and medium-sized enterprises to achieve that industrialization. The third point I would like to underscore is the role of infrastructure for development. We have a program, an ongoing program for development in Africa, and that emphasizes the regional dimension of infrastructure projects. And I always like to give the example of the fact that when a country, and this is giving you a picture with the example, because I'm thinking of a bridge, so visually, when a country decides to build a bridge, and half the bridge reaches the border, unless the other country builds the other half of the bridge, there will be no bridge. This is the image I want to portray to you so that you understand that those regional infrastructure projects are crucial. That is what we are doing, setting up regional corridors. So the question is, what role could be played by Spain? Spain could play a role in the three sectors that I've already touched on. One, industrialization. The experience and the know-how of Spain's small and medium-sized enterprises that are obviously bigger than African small and medium-sized enterprises could help. They could play a crucial role. The Spanish government could help to attract Spanish SMEs and to steer them towards the African continent, not just those huge companies that we're familiar with. And that isn't the first point for you. The second one that I would like to mention with regard to infrastructure is that we know that that energy will play a fundamental role in industrialization. And energy, as Vera said herself before, has to be renewable energy. Spain has built up a considerable amount of experience in the renewable energy sector. I was looking at the figures for Spanish companies that are specialized in solar energy and other renewable energy forms, and I see that there is a trend that is very positive, because there is a trend to setting up more and more projects in Africa. And the third point I would like to highlight, where Spanish companies can play a role, is that in our 2063 agenda that we have in the African Union, one key dimension is that nexus between energy, climate change, and water. This is going to be a huge sphere for investment, the benefits, the advantages for those companies that could invest here will be very high. So in those three spheres, those fields, I think Spanish companies could play a fundamental role. And my very last point for you, I could actually talk on, and I would like to emphasize this last point. In our NEPAD, we run the most far-reaching, biggest women's empowerment program in the last 50 years. It is 66 projects in that fund in 37 countries, all focused on empowering women in small and medium-sized enterprises in rural areas and urban areas. Now, this has been a tremendous success. There are very few success stories as big as this one. Thank you. Thank you very much. You have certainly raised so many different important points as you've been speaking to us. That last one, empowerment of women, also in rural areas. I think perhaps goes back to that initial point that you made about the informal economy, where often women are operating in business, and that informal economy has to be made more official. And then you talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area and how it is a project that can help companies to move into the official, the formal economy. Industrialization is another point you made. Those value chains that can help the scaling up, the coordination of neighboring complementary economies that can reinforce a regional-wide industry that will, of course, be much stronger through trade, investment, and economic integration. It's a project that I'm sure is bound to be successful, and here in Spain, in the Spanish government, we are very keen to track the progress of the free trade area, and we wish you every success. And you've also touched on a number of key sectors for development in Africa, and I'm sure we could talk about those areas in more detail with Marta Blanco, who is the president of CEOE International, because this really does seem to be a perfect fit with the strengths of the Spanish business sector, infrastructure, industry, energy, climate change, water, you said too. From the standpoint of those sectors that Ibrahim mentioned just now, where do you see the key opportunities for Spanish businesses in Africa? And what do you think Spanish companies should do to take better advantage of those opportunities? First of all, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much to the Minister for having invited me to speak and participate in this panel session with such key figures. As the Secretary of State has just said, we have heard a lot of contributions already from the speakers in this panel today. And I would like to give you my view from the perspective of Spanish business, particularly today. It's very important if we think about that 2023 Africa focus. We would like to congratulate the Ministry and all of the departments that have made this focus so successful. There is the cultural, the economic, the political, the social dimension in it, and I think all of them interconnect and are important. After listening to all of the speakers in the panel session this afternoon, I would perhaps conclude something that is perhaps self-evident, and it's in the title of our panel today, and that is Spanish investment to address the opportunities of the African continent. I really don't think there is a match there yet between the Spanish investment and the whole host of opportunities are there. And after hearing what we've heard today, the question is, what do we need to do to make sure that Spanish companies have a bigger footprint in Africa? There are a lot of assets in Africa. The free trade area is certainly a magnificent opportunity for us in Spain because it will reduce the vulnerability of Africa as a continent with the view to other countries abroad. It will accelerate the changes there. But there are also other factors that are interesting for us in Spanish businesses. The market itself, the urban development that's taking place that also generates demand in all of these sectors that we've been talking about. Now, all of these aspects make us think that we are now in a position to close that virtuous circle. There are opportunities in Africa, there is interest here in Spain, and therefore the presence of Spanish business in Africa should certainly increase. I think we all can make our own input to this challenge. I think we all need to do what we can to turn this into a reality. Governments, institutions in Africa, just as we've heard before, can do their bit. We need to certainly unlock the potential of all of the work that is being done to create a good business environment in Africa, to improve the legal certainty of the business environment, to develop financial markets locally. Those markets are so important to have better interaction of Spanish companies in the African continent, and also to improve the development of local companies. These are also important points. Youth, young people has been mentioned, the importance of upskilling and training for those young people. This morning in the event that we held with the president of the Spanish government here, someone mentioned how important training was for the young people in the company, because it was an opportunity for more technology, more foreign direct investment. So these questions are all fundamental. You may also be wondering, from the standpoint of companies, listening to this story that we're telling, that maybe we don't have a true up-to-date vision of what there is in Africa. We have to work on that, bring that up to date. And maybe there isn't sufficient knowledge about how competitive Spanish companies are and what Spanish companies are doing in other markets. Once again, we need to do some work there to ensure that the competitive skills of Spanish companies are recognized. Meetings such as the one that we've had today with the President of Ghana in our organization, CEOE, will certainly help us to foster that bringing together of interests on both sides. As for the sectors themselves, of course, the demand from most of the countries, although of course Africa is highly diverse, I mean, people always say that, but I think that there's a wealth of opportunities there that makes it all the more richer. But going back to sectors, we have to make sure that the demand matches up with the competitive level of Spanish companies that are keen to get into African markets. We have to bring the two sides together. From the viewpoint of the Spanish government, seeing as we are sitting here in this event in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation in Spain, we're very grateful to all of the instruments that are offered to promote and help finance the presence of companies from Spain in Africa. For instance, any facilitation of our position there on the financing, as well as the risk with regard to these countries, viability or feasibility studies, that would also help increase the presence of Spanish companies there. And it would also be useful for Spanish companies to have to benefit more from the European Union recovery funds. I know there is a lot of talk at the moment about this. There's dialogue there with the ministry, and we will also work in that area. Before I finish, I'd like to thank the ambassadors, a lot of whom are here today, in Africa, and also those who are from Africa here in Madrid. Thank you to the people who work in the trade offices out there in African countries. They help very much Spanish companies. I know it's diplomacy, but sometimes they can also help Spanish companies with very specific matters, such as finding a local partner, and that is also key. So all in all, Secretary of State, let me tell you that we feel that there are the right conditions for that presence to be increased. Political will is certainly there, and I think today, more than ever before, we saw that political will consolidated between Spain and Africa. There is also interest on the part of Spanish companies, and that means what we have to do is work together, all of the stakeholders, all of those involved in trade and investment, to make this greater presence of Spanish companies in Africa a reality. Thank you very much, Marta, for your message. Such a positive message. You've talked about opportunities. You've talked about how to take advantage of the opportunities. And you said, and you're right, that all of the factors, all of the elements are there. And what we have to do is ensure there is more mutual knowledge there, that Spanish companies know more about the African continent, know about the diversity there, and also to make sure that the knowledge is brought up to date. That dynamic reality that is there in Africa is perhaps not so well known, and we have to have a more up-to-date idea of that. And of course, the African authorities, the local companies there also need to better understand the strength of our Spanish companies. I'd like to thank the CEOE through you, because you also help us to ensure that market access strategies and business opportunity strategies are endorsed, and that we can incorporate the needs of Spanish companies in a market that is perhaps not so well known. The ministry's strategy that I talked about at the beginning is certainly enhanced thanks to the input we get from the business community through you. So thank you very much. Marta also mentioned as a tool those business gathering and encounters. So let me move on to Jaime Montalvo from the Chamber of Commerce in Spain. I think you would surely be able to follow on from what Marta said. I think one of the things that we are often told by companies, and the African ambassadors themselves in Madrid tell us this, that we have to strengthen that linkage between government institutions, the public sector, with official visits. We have to make that connection and those linkages and those bridges more visible, so that we can have a more propitious environment for trade and economic relations over the next few weeks. I believe there will be some high-level trips made to African countries. I'm sure, Jaime, you're well aware of that because you are the Director General of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, and working together with the Secretary of State's Office for Commerce and with CEOE, we do put together the business side of those high-level visits. Do you think that we need to emphasize and attach importance to that side of the visits, the high-level visits, in both ways?
Thank you, Secretary of State. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. And first of all, before I answer your question, I would like to join Marta in thanking the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for inviting us to this interesting roundtable discussion. It's been very interesting to listen to such significant people, and thank you to the government of Spain and the Ministry for Focus Africa 2023. It's very necessary, very timely, and all the organizations present here today join it enthusiastically. I would also like to thank all the institutions with whom we work on a regular basis for fostering relations, beginning with the ambassadors, with the Spanish Trade Administration, with institutions such as Casa Africa, whose director is with us here today, and not to speak of now that we're going to be talking about business meetings of the cooperation between this Confederation of Spanish Industry, the State Secretariat for Trade, and the Confederation of Spanish Business, to the opportunity for business meets to bring the business community to significant markets. It's the right instrument, not only as an information channel, but because it also enables the business men and women who participate to know their counterparts for any opportunity that may come up. The business confederations they meet, and also for those in charge in the public sphere, not only to become familiar with the economic situation in the countries, but also the particulars. The business meeting as such is especially valuable because of the presence. We do have to carry out very many actions with Africa, but also in Africa. We need to go to Africa to know its reality firsthand, together with our African counterparts. I think that's what adds value to these business meetings and the strategy behind the partnership proposed by Focus Africa 2023. You really cannot know an area, a region, before you visit it physically. You cannot see the opportunities it offers if you aren't in touch with your counterparts there, and if you are not accompanied by the institutions, Spanish, European, that are financing this, and the authorities in charge of implementing the programs. High-level visits, such as a visit by the President of the government, are an opportunity for companies to have interlocutors at the highest level. Thanks to these visits and trips, enormous efforts are deployed by the institutions, and that is the key to these business meetings, to combine that public-private partnership environment. So, and we continue to work on the three-side agreement. This institutional support, because we are also institutions, even if we are in the private sector, and we are also totally for Africa. You see everything that's been said today, the enormous opportunities, and how important it is to go there. And I have one question, the Secretary of State for Commerce says. Marta was mentioning earlier education training is a key element to improve the business climate and the conditions to make investment attractive, to have foreign companies, and the technology transfer that comes with the opening up of the markets, which is the breeding ground for to make the best possible use, and that requires training of human capital. But I'm sure there are other factors. What is your view on these other factors or elements that can propitiate the arrival, the presence, the consolidation, the internationalization of Spanish companies in African markets, both from the standpoint of the private sector as from what we can do from public institutions? Today we are talking about investment, but investment is just one part, the end part of the process of going to a market. Companies have to invest time to learn, to develop a strategy, to get to know markets that are not that well known to us, such as the African markets, and also to focus, because Africa is an enormous continent, and you need to choose and focus on your countries. Companies that are interested in enlarging their presence in Africa have institutions. We back them with commercial offices, with meetings. We organize business meetings. There are financing schemes that, such as Horizonte Africa, and also consultancy and advisory work through commercial offices and the chambers as well. In addition to these public instruments, companies also have other supports. The Spanish companies who have gone ahead of them into Africa, with whom we think there could be a help, and also out of the relationships with local companies, and bringing the Spanish business community to its partners in Africa is something we all have to work on. Of course, the public administrations, the embassies, and the chambers of commerce and business organizations, but that on the side of the private sector. But from the institutions, what we think is a role of paramount importance is coordination. Focus Africa 2023 is an enormous effort of coordination that brings together different administrations with great reach, as Marta was mentioning, as Marta Blanco was aligned with the strategy of the European Union that has deployed recently its comprehensive strategy for Africa. It's a sustainable, digital, inclusive agenda focusing on investment and trade with a great deal of financial backing. This plan and this Spanish strategy, which comes under Horizon Africa and the Plan Africa, and now Focus Africa, offers a much more coordinated and integrated framework that will allow Spain to take a step into a continent that, as compared to other European countries, we are not as present as we should. Of course, therefore, the Spanish administration, the government, needs to support companies. But then there are countries, and with this I will end. We've talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area that will offer tremendous opportunities, and it's already been ratified by so many African countries. But then there's what the countries themselves are doing to offer a framework of stability, a much more open environment. And in this field, there's so much to do in keeping companies abreast, and that's where the role of embassies is so important, and we feel very comfortable working with them. In a nutshell, before I end, we need to strengthen that private-public partnership, and the chambers of commerce are also working on training programs with our African counterparts. We need to make the best possible use of the development bank's financing and also bilateral financing. We're here at the headquarters of the Spanish Foreign Affairs headquarters, and if we all work together, all these opportunities with the support of the administration, with the PPPs, and we can increase and consolidate Spain's presence in Africa in the coming years. Thank you, Jaime. I think Marta had a few words to add here. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and but also, in addition to training, today we have also been able to talk about how important it is for investors that we share legal frameworks, the two of us, the ratification of international treaties that offers this common legal framework. This is very important in fostering these exchanges. And then from Spain's experience, and I know this is of interest to many African countries, that the countries in Africa can negotiate and reach an agreement between governments, in this case civil society, companies, trade unions. All of this is of paramount importance to carry out development agendas in these countries. As you were saying, that legal framework needs to be predictable, understandable, stable. We need legal certainty, and that is what companies seek when they go abroad. These are commitments and strategies that are always a risk, so we need to reduce those risks. Well, thank you all very much for participating in this roundtable discussion. It's been a great pleasure to share this time with you. I think it is clear that Spain is firmly committed, its government, the administration, the companies, to lead the way in this new approach for Africa. We want to be there. We want to, with a reliable partner and interlocutor in our African friends, and Spanish companies may be arriving later, but not late. I think the timing is perfect, as Jaime was saying and Ibrahim was saying earlier, and the other panel members. This initiative of the African Continental Free Trade Area is a very exciting project. It will open up very many opportunities through trade and investment to establish and consolidate some of Spain's initiatives in African countries. And in this current context of the COVID-19 pandemic, as Vera mentioned earlier, how could we be talking about companies right at a time like this? Well, precisely because the recovery of Spain and of Europe and Africa will also reach us through international cooperation at every level, and also through trade and investment. Therefore, I hope I've left you with a good taste and appetite to work together on this international agenda of Spain and Africa. And from the Spanish public sector, we are fully committed, more committed than ever, to our brother and sister countries in Africa.
Focus Africa is the strategic action of the Spanish government with Africa.
Il nous faut, avant toute chose, consolider la paix civile, là où elle existe, avec un investissement dans l'économie. Pour que des emplois soient créés,
c'est absolument fondamental pour la paix et la sécurité.
Nous avons ce qu'on appelle ici le Covid économique. C'est ainsi qu'on a eu, il y a 3 mois, beaucoup de nos jeunes qui ont essayé de prendre la mer avec un bilan, hélas, très triste de plus de 400 jeunes qui se sont noyés dans l'océan.
Or prevent the irregular migration.
The continental level, I think the momentum created by the continental free trade area. The second priority should be boosting social protection. And finally, the third priority, I think, is digitalization.
No serán alcanzables sin grandes mejorías en buena gobernanza.
Hay que conseguir que la vacunación contra la COVID-19 llegue a todos los rincones de África.
Nous savons, nous, pouvoir compter sur nos amis espagnols, dont la simplicité, l'accès facile, la proximité géographique, ont contribué à créer une communauté d'intérêt dans certains domaines.
Spain has detached itself from the law.
La diplomacia cultural ha servido para tender puentes.
L'Espagne sert également d'exemple à nos investisseurs sénégalais avec la modernisation du système agricole.
If we are going to move into a more climate responsible behavior, we need to lower our carbon footprint as much as possible, and Spain certainly knows the techniques, knows the technology, and can be a big player in terms of sustainable infrastructure.
Hoy en día sigue habiendo mucha empresa española y mucha institución española que tiene muchísimo miedo a África, y bueno, que viajen por este continente y verán que realmente no hay tanto de qué asustarse.
Muy importante también para la paz y la cohesión social el que las mujeres se vean apoyadas.
Et évidemment, il y a également la coopération entre les femmes espagnoles et les femmes sénégalaises et africaines.
Destacaría sobre todo los apoyos dados por España para reducir la brecha de género y empoderar a las mujeres. Un ámbito donde, sin embargo, es necesario saber adaptarse a las culturas locales.
El gobierno español ha decidido tener una política exterior feminista.
We have to focus Africa 2023 and to try to engage the countries themselves to look at what are the priorities within the country and things that they think might be useful for the population, for this mutual partnership that they are looking forward to.
Buenas tardes. It's a pleasure to start this second roundtable of the launch of Focus Africa 2023 and to devote it to the issue of women and girls empowerment. Es un placer estar hoy aquí en esta segunda mesa redonda.
It's a pleasure to be here at the second roundtable discussion on the empowerment of women and girls, part of the partnership between Spain and Africa, which is one of a focus of Focus Africa 2023, an initiative of the entire Spanish government with all its economic, political, and social implications to tighten the bonds between Spain and the African continent, so to the mutual benefit of both. This evening, we will be talking about the empowerment of girls and women, because Spain wants it and Africa wants it. It's a symbol of something that unites us, of a task that we know is unfinished, that COVID actually has brought us back. And that's why it worries us. We want to talk about the empowerment of women and girls in the Africa-Spain partnership, and we have a luxury representation here. We have Ibrahim, the mayor of Tunis. We have Shirley Akor Botchway, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration of Ghana.
This is a double bonus. We also Monique, you're following us from Addis. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. You are the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission and a very dear friend. Let me say that also as a disclosure. Y por último, pero no por ello menos importante,
And finally, and very importantly, we have Maria Teresa Fernandez de la Vega, who requires no introduction here in Spain. But for those of you who don't know her, she is the president of the Foundation Women for Africa and chairwoman of the Council of State of Spain and a tireless advocate of the rights of women and girls. Thank you, Maria Teresa, for being here with us.
This will be a conversation, and it will be a mix between what we will hear over the screen with what we will hear from around the table here in Madrid. And I'm going to start with Monique. Monique, we all know that the African Union places in its priorities for 2063 a big premium on women and girls. We also know that in this task of ours, this task that was advancing before the COVID, we've seen a regression. And we wanted to hear from you how does the African Union Commission intend to advance this priority that is women and girls, in that we will not be able to lift our economies, we will not be able to recover ourselves if we do not include women and girls in this effort. But moreover, our societies will be weaker if we do not work for rights of women, rights of girls that are an integral part of society and our shared goals. So Monique, I wanted to give you the floor for you to share with us how does the African Union Commission intend to work on this, and how can this partnership that we've launched today, Focus Africa, how can it help?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Arancha González, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, and the host of this round table. Indeed, a friend. Greetings to you and to the esteemed panelists and the other invited guests to this round table. It's a pleasure to be here and to be given this opportunity to share what the African Union Commission has been doing with the Kingdom of Spain, and also planning to do, which is going to be enhanced with this Focus Africa 2023. Maybe by way of starting, let me mention that we have enjoyed a great, excellent partnership in the past, which has contributed to many things, including agenda, equality, and women's economic empowerment strategy, including also the support in many areas, such as policy making processes, consultations with the Pan-African women's organizations, such as PAO, the
African Union's Specialized Agency on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, as well as to the Gender is My Agenda campaign, just to name a few initiatives. We have also enjoyed the support to sub-programs such as the NEPAD Spanish Fund for African Women's Empowerment. As you rightly said, Honorable Minister, the African Union heads of state and government have declared 2030 as the African Women's Decade on financial and economic inclusion for African women. This has been built on initiatives by African women leaders, particularly the African Women Leaders Network that launched the African Women Leadership Fund, as well as the NEPAD Spanish Fund I mentioned before. The African Union will continue this work of supporting women and girls by putting in place a trust fund for African women. This is going to serve as a financial mechanism to provide access to financing for women. These mechanisms are critical for African women economic empowerment, especially as we are building back and restructuring our economies to create resilience against COVID-19. The African Union has also developed guidelines for gender-responsive responses to the COVID-19 to support the integration of gender equality and women and girls empowerment and enhance women and youth leadership in all recovery plans. I should here mention that we have to recognize the Spain's contributions to Africa's efforts to fight against this pandemic, especially through the support to the Africa CDC's partnership to accelerate COVID-19 testing, the PACT initiative. So it is my hope that looking forward, we are going to continue enjoy the same great partnership. I can only hope that Spain's Focus Africa 2023 will meet us halfway on these work streams on women entrepreneurship, on economic and financial inclusion, as well as digital innovations aimed at enhancing women's resilience and uptake of the business opportunities offered by the African Continental Free Trade Area, for instance. And I can assure you, on behalf of the African Union Commission, that we look forward to close collaboration with you in joint planning and priority setting for mutually beneficial initiatives. And on our side, we are going to continue to ensure that our work is well coordinated across the Commission, including different portfolios led by different commissioners, because this agenda of including women and girls has to cut across. And this also includes our specialized entities such as AUDA-NEPAD, such as African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and others. We all must work together to deliver maximum impact to African women. So you asked that question of what we have been doing. That is the bid for economic and financial inclusion work, but also we've been very actively engaged on empowering women and girls in terms of securing their rights to safety, to security, and to peace, and which is ultimately contributing to giving them I would say, safe spaces on the continent, rather than letting them despair and looking for greener pastures beyond the continent. So we are going to continue that work as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monique. Thank you for raising these very important areas of priority. You've mentioned women, peace and security. You've mentioned women's economic empowerment, access to finance, digital inclusion. You have mentioned women in leadership. And you've also mentioned rights, the agenda of rights for women and girls and the creation of safer spaces. You've also mentioned gender-responsive policies to COVID, and I want to now turn to Minister Ayokor Botchaway. Shirley, in the middle of the pandemic, just last year, a group of women foreign ministers decided to meet. And we first started discussing, well, what can we do? What can we bring to this conversation? Out of this conversation that we started, it culminated in a resolution that the General Assembly of the United Nations took last year to put women and girls at the center of the fight against COVID. Now, we did this because we thought that it was important, as Monique was saying, to incorporate this dimension of women and girls in all the recovery policies. In Building Back Better, we would not repeat the mistakes we had made in the past, and we could mainstream gender into the responses. And I know that you cared a lot about that, and I know you pushed a lot for this, Shirley. So I wanted to give you the floor to share with us how does this battle look like from where you sit, which is Ghana, a country that has placed equality between men and women at the heart of the agenda, but also a country that at the moment chairs the ECOWAS community. So Shirley, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arancha, and let me thank you for making this possible. We live in times where there's so much uncertainty, and it is important to bring up at every given opportunity the issue to do with women and children. Mm-hmm. And I say this because generally, even before COVID, all countries were striving towards ensuring that we instill in everybody that without empowering women, no country will develop as it should. Because it's like not even having one leg and trying to move, but it's even more than that. And I say that because in Africa, and I'm sure elsewhere, women are more than 50%. Mm-hmm. So it's more than, if you use the analogy of our two legs, it's more than one leg, because we're about 51-point-something%. And so doing anything without taking into account the woman's perspective, I think that it would be a disservice to nations and to the whole world. And I'm happy to note that we've all embraced the gender issue, the African Union, in our case, ECOWAS, and also even more so during the times in which we live. In times of pandemic, most countries were shut down. We were under lockdown for many months. And as a result of that, women and children had to stay home. So there was a lot of sexual violence against women. Apart from that, if you take Africa's example, it's the women who are involved in trading. They own the micro, small enterprises. It's the women who are farmers, the smallholder farmers. And all of a sudden, here comes COVID. They're not able to do any work because there's lockdown, basically. And so they bear the brunt of the effects of this pandemic. And even when you look at the hospitality industry around the whole world that has been hit so hard, it employs a lot of women. So when you see women losing their incomes, even within the cultural setting where they are not as assertive as in other places, and then all of a sudden they're being pushed down even further, then you know that we have real issues. And so there must be concerted efforts to ensure that we bring them up, because otherwise they're just going to stay down. And when the women stay down, the children stay down as well. And so in the case of ECOWAS, a decision on women and sexual-based violence within the framework of COVID-19, the pandemic, was endorsed by our heads of states. And we're ensuring that we speak and act and put in policies against gender-based violence and sexual exploitation and all the harmful practices within that could occur as a result of COVID-19 and also beyond that. We, as a country, Ghana, and it pertains within the West African region as well, we have made conscious effort to empower women and to ensure that we do everything to make them part of national development. When you go to other parts of Africa, such as the Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, they have moved a lot further in terms of empowering women more than Western Africa. But we are moving quickly as ECOWAS to ensure that we have enough women in decision making. We have enough women in politics, because that is where most of the laws are made. That is where most of the decisions are made. So we are moving towards where we are looking at how to ensure that we have the critical mass of women who can make the decision. This is not to say that the men do not. We have men who are very committed to the women's cause. But I believe that it is women who can push our cause more than anybody else. And that is what we are doing. So in Ghana, for instance, we are ensuring that 30% of women are, if they're not elected, they are appointed into positions. We are ensuring that political parties make an effort to bring up the women into political positions. We are in the process, and hopefully in this parliament, we will be passing the affirmative action bill into law so that we can pull the women up, whether it's by the quota system or to ensure that they are given a soft landing in terms of making sure that we bring them up. This is not to say that it will be forever, but up to a point where we now know that we have the number of women in order that they are representative of what the population actually depicts. So these are some of the things that we're looking at ensuring that women have access to funds, access to financing. We are looking at making sure that women, the capacity of women is built even before they have access to these funds. We want to make sure that they know how to handle these funds. We are looking at access to making sure that because of our cultural practices, it's difficult for women to own land, for instance. And if you don't own land, it is difficult for you to even go to a bank to get a loan and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that we are doing to make sure that we build their capacities, to make sure that we are able to give them an opportunity through the land that they have leased or that is owned by the family, that they'll be able to use that land to get funds or financing to invest into the businesses. Also, to ensure that women are brought up during this period, we are pushing them into entrepreneurship. And for us, that is very important because all these young people who, as a result of our free senior high school education, and it's something that is happening in other countries as well, we need to be able to find work for them. The public sector cannot employ all these young people. So we need to ensure that we provide them with some skills to be able to be on their own. So these are all things that we are looking at, and we are doing a lot in that direction. Of course, in Ghana, we are making sure that we provide free education for all girls so that they are not left behind. So in short, these are some of the areas that we are making sure that we pull the women who are ordinarily down usually, but even more so because of COVID, and to make sure that once COVID is over, we can help them come back up.
Thank you so much. You have focused on how to deal with the COVID worsening situation for women and girls. I've taken from your words this focus on education and skills building, free education, access to the knowledge and the skills that are necessary in order to thrive, including in the economy, which needs to be coupled with access to finance, with dealing with land ownership issues, with capacity building. And I've also noted your comments on violence against women that has also worsened during the crisis. Is a message that today, the day when the Generation Equality Forum opens in Mexico, we are sending also as a strong message. We want to send as a strong message. There is the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and then there is this silent pandemic of violence against women that has horribly hardened and worsened during the COVID, which we need to put an end to. Quiero ahora...
Let me give the floor to Maria Teresa now. Maria Teresa, very recently, of course, as you know, we have adopted a feminist foreign policy. It's not that before we didn't practice a feminist foreign policy, and a lot of the people in government before me, like you, have worked very hard to make sure that gender equality is at the very heart of the public sector agenda, the government's policy agenda. And I want to thank you personally, because you have really opened up the path, making it easier for us to follow on. But I want to talk about that particular feminist foreign policy. A lot of that is very, very linked to what you do in your Foundation Women for Africa. You use Spanish solidarity and generosity to help other women, particularly women on the African continent. So what I wanted today is for you to tell us about what you do. And from your experience, how do you think we can better drive that solidarity and generosity from Spain to Africa? Thank you very much, Minister. First of all, congratulations. Thank you, and congratulations for having organized such an important event today. Good afternoon to you, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ghana, and of course, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. I'm delighted to be here today. First of all, then, Congratulations to you, my dear friend Arancha González, for this invitation to this panel and this whole initiative. It's such an important and necessary panel event today. So well done. Well done for promoting it. It's a panel whose content is something I feel deeply identified with, because the empowerment of women, African women, forms part, and I think everyone knows this, here in Spain at least, of the day-to-day work that is done in the foundation that I'm the president of. Women for Africa is the name of the foundation. We are working with a long-term view in our minds, and we're doing this work together with African women. We're absolutely convinced that working for this goal is a prerequisite, not only to drive the development of the African continent, but also to give women the status of freedom and equality that they should have as human beings, so that they can live a decent life. All over the world, women, we women, have always been, not just now, improving people's lives, making life possible, looking after life. And in Africa, that is something that women do day in, day after, I think more than any other place in the world. African women, I know we're talking about Africa and African women this afternoon, have always, therefore, been looking after life and caring for people. That doesn't mean to say they have been able to fully exercise their own right to life. And I always remember what the top leader, ambassador from Tanzania, Gertrude Mongella, said to me. She was, of course, the first president of the Pan-African Parliament. She said to us, she said to me, we African women are survivors, and as survivors, we help the continent to survive, Africa to survive, and you'll see that. African women produce most of the food there. They are the ones that are operating in the informal economy. They are keeping their families going day in, day out, and they're looking after their communities, keeping them united. And they keep their kids going to school and getting healthcare. And that's healthcare. That's so important now in the circumstances of the pandemic. Of course, I would say that it's 70% of all of the healthcare is given comes from the women themselves. Women, the African women, are fighting to get a chance to study, to go to university, to get a career. And despite all of the obstacles, they managed to become wonderful professionals. We know that directly. We have first experience in our Women for Africa Foundation, because every single year we bring young African women to Spain to study with grants at universities, to do scientific research. They get their training there. We have given those grants to these women in Spain. We have a wonderful program called Women in Science for exceptional African female researchers. These are senior researchers, and they came to Spain to study specialized areas of research, and they go to the top centers, for instance, like the Vera Ochoa Center. I always tell the story of when I set up this program. I went to see the president of that center, and I said, I want to actually run a program with a female researcher from Africa. She said, female researcher from Africa? Are there really any female researchers in Africa? I said, of course there are. I'll bring you some. And for the last 10 years, we've been bringing those African female researchers here to Spain. Hundreds of them have been able to study at the Vera Ochoa or the top universities. And that is an example of leadership. We've also been able to work with the top political leaders, ministers like you, presidents, vice presidents, economic leadership programs with the Yale University, also females from the world of business, helping them to get that step up. We've worked together with Babson College in the States to give them those skilling. And I'll tell you, it's always been so successful. It's amazing how they perform. People are absolutely astonished by their performance. And I think everybody, not just us in the foundation, should see that all of this works with African women. The whole world is seeing what's happening. There's some incredible women in Africa, and not just now. There have always been wonderful African women. Women such as the wonderful Wangari Maathai, the very first woman to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and the woman who planted millions of trees out there in the Amazon area. She's an inspiration for us in the foundation. She was the pioneer. She was the one that transformed the whole perception about what it means to protect the environment. She should be the one, I think, behind the 2030 agenda. What about women such as President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who really forged that country, Liberia, democratic and in peace, Catherine Samba-Panza, or the vice president we saw on the video before, Aminata Touré in Senegal, or Graça Machel, or the new director general. I know she's a friend of yours, the new director general at the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And of course, I could go on and on with all these names, a whole list of them. They're all so wonderful in all different spheres of life. And then there's, of course, the indomitable thinker, Nawal El-Saadawi. Unfortunately, we've lost her. Or the writer, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, an author who's actually told the story of the West through an African lens, not the other way around. So she has actually told the story of how we are, but always through the eyes of someone from Africa. And we, of course, have women such as you, ministers, vice presidents on this panel. You are all just the tip of an iceberg, a huge iceberg, an iceberg of millions of women who day after day are fighting at a disadvantage to make a life for themselves, to help their families and communities. They're women who are creating, who are inventing, who are entrepreneurs. They're managing and leading. And Africa, they are the backbone, the engine of Africa. And when anyone sets out with a goal, they should actually know the strengths and weaknesses to be able to achieve that goal. Africa and the whole world looking at Africa has to know, see, and understand that the biggest strength of Africa as a continent are not the resources they've got or whatever. It's women. It's African women. And let's see if everybody can finally wake up to that. It's the African women. And we should get to know them, listen to them, understand them in their own context, of course, respect them and support them and act in consequence. Be beside their side. Minister, help them to be able to unlock their full potential, because they are able to do that. They are able to unlock the potential, get the most out of their own environment and the people around them. We need to try to contribute to their empowerment, because empowering these women is to walk with them, to be beside them, to listen to them, to see them, back them, accompany them with their initiatives, because they are the ones who act. We just have to support them with resources. We have to endorse their claims. And another thing that's very important, we have to make them visible. People have to get to know them, know their achievements. These women have done so much. They have fought for peace. Well, peace. There's a whole chapter I could move into, Minister, to talk about peace, because they are women who have suffered the consequences of violence in all of those multiple conflicts that are still ongoing in their continent. They're fighting for their rights, but also for democracy in their countries, because I'm only just getting to know all of these women now. African feminisms are so rich, plural, brave, innovative, and committed. And now we have our minister from Ghana. That manifesto of the women from the women in your country, in Ghana, that has been so important, hasn't it? It still is. It's still there, driving equality and progress for everybody. But it's not known all over the world. I think people should sit down and read your manifesto from Ghana. I think it would be great for us to take on board that. And there's also the action of the Coalition of Women in South Africa, who they included the rights in the constitution that was driven by Nelson Mandela. They were the most feminist, the most modern women there. They did that before we did in Europe. There is also the successful and tireless actions by Tunisian women fighting for freedom, fighting for peace. The women in Liberia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan. the mark that is left by women, African women, is there in the most advanced constitutions of the whole continent and in the world. And I have to tell you that I'm so, so happy that my government, the government of Spain, is now promoting a feminist foreign policy. You know that I did congratulate you from the outset when I heard about the policy. I myself was honoured to be part of the government that was led by Prime Minister Rodrigo Zapatero. And we also look towards Africa. I think this is a convergence of sides that will certainly be productive and fruitful. And when you get to know African women, you realize the impact that African women have today, that huge impact that their action would have in a more favorable environment, in more favorable conditions. They don't have those favorable conditions. If their societies weren't patriarchal, their impact would be incredible. If they didn't have those glass ceilings, if they weren't riding in the back of the bus without those interferences from people in and outside their countries, if that wasn't the case, the impact would be huge. They would help to make the whole world progress. African women know their own land and their people better than anybody else. We shouldn't try and do anything in Africa without African women. We need to work with them always. We need to learn from them. We have always learned from them, and the world and governments and agencies, international bodies can learn so much from African women. We need to have more balance between regions. They can help us to get that. We need to look at Africa and treat it as a continent on equal footing and not just simply as an endless source of economic benefit for us. That has to come to an end. And then that other way of looking at Africa in that approach is the only way of generating progress, real progress and inclusive growth, fair growth for all citizens. It's African women who are the key. They possess, right across the board, a new idea, a new concept of leadership, of moving forward. And we have to help them in the two areas where the situation is tougher for them today. Economic inequality is massive, that gap there. We have to do more there. And also with regard to violence in conflicts. It's not that the situation is terrible, it's worse than terrible. There, in all the years since the 1325 resolution, the UN Security Council resolution, and all those years, and there's just been the anniversary, there hasn't been a single conflict in the world that has included those female negotiators in the conflicts. They're not listened to, no one takes any notice of them, they're not taken into account in peace process negotiations that all fail, of course. If women were there, they wouldn't. Those processes fail because there are no women in those peace negotiations. We can't go on like that. In our Women for Africa Foundation, Minister, we have set up the Alliance of Women for Peace. That is part of the Alliance of Civilizations with Minister Moratinos. There is a group of women who now form part of that Alliance for Peace, and we're starting to work, do some proper work there to get that peace. Because right now, conflicts are all open. They're still ongoing. And we have to talk about that. We have to not just give them the training they need as negotiators in peace process, and we are doing that. We are in the Alliance of Civilizations involved in that. We're also part of the UN Civil Society Alliance. I think I've already told you about the work we're doing there, and we would hope to rely on your participation in an encounter on sexual violence in conflicts. We'd like to do that with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain and with NATO and with the Ministry of Defense in Spain to see how we can move forward. We have to move forward. We have to put these issues on the table. Minister, of course, Europe does nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Europe. I mean, I don't think we can even expect Europe to do anything with regard to the peace process. And a number of times we've tried to get these projects from the European Union with regard to processes of peace, and we didn't get any of them. No, we didn't get the one for Mali or anywhere. So women do not get the assistance they need. They don't get that possibility to even get training as trainers themselves. We're trying to put together that training course for women to be trained as mediators in peace processes, so that if they are called on to go and mediate in peace processes, they're ready for it. There's only been one single woman in a peace process. That was in Mali. That was in the Algiers process, and she was there. She was there, sitting at that table in the peace process, and we had trained that woman. And she's still there, struggling, because, well, I don't want to go on about this too much. No, I shouldn't go on, really, should I? Let me just say that to you, Minister. We also have to work in that area too, and I think if we did, then we would get much more effective results, because we know what is happening. We have access to African women. We're close to them. We're close to Africa. We have, of course, moved much closer, and I think we have to share that experience, pool that experience, and multiply it. Thank you very much for your collaboration. You always collaborate with us, and I hope that after this panel session, we'll take further steps forward.
Thank you, Maria Teresa. From your words, your very enriching words, I keep the need to contribute to how important it is to invest in leadership, in peace and security, and so that the community can benefit. And the key words you have mentioned. Now, I would like to give the floor to Souad Abderrahim. You are the mayor of Tunis. You are a very important dimension here in this panel, the local dimension, the terre-à-terre, the closest to the ground. And thank you, Madam Mayor, for being with us in our work today. And I'd like to give you the floor, because it is true that this local dimension, the dimension you know better, and where we could have a bit more power, more duties at that level. You have the floor, Madam Mayor.
Si vous pourriez brancher les micros, s'il vous plaît.
Perhaps you could just switch on your microphone for us. Thank you.
Vous m'entendez maintenant? Voilà, parfait.
Can you hear me now? I hope so. Yes, we can just hear you. Thank you very much. Yes, Madam President of the African Women's Foundation, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank very warmly the Minister for giving me the honor to participate in this panel session for a number of reasons. First of all, as a person in a political position in Tunisia, I do appreciate the support that was given by Spain to my country in the past. Spain has a development agency for cooperation. You have helped us very much. That initiative has helped us for Tunisia to be considered a benchmark country with regard to democratic governance in the region, thanks to the 2014 Tunisian constitution. In this context, at the same time, we have been identified as a partner in cooperation with Spain's cooperation agency. Let me also make reference to the spirit of your initiative. That yes, the IMF at its board has also helped us. We, of course, are very much concerned with the same questions that you are looking at in culture. For instance, women have had political rights long before other European countries. The transition has been ongoing for a long time. A woman could have been the Queen of Castile. In Spain, women keep their surname. That is not always the case in Europe right now. What I would like to say in my words today is congratulations with regard to women's governance there in the continent. Ian, thank you very much for the interest you are taking in African women. We are comforted by that. We do believe, of course, that women have a key role to play in the new development approach. Of course, we have to ensure that women are not marginalized. That is why women have not been able to play an effective role unless there have been specific measures to allow their empowerment. We believe that that is a negative treatment for African women. And I would also like, as mayor of this city, to explain how we need new examples. A number of African countries, girls are not necessarily given their reason. We have to ensure that girls are given their place, and I think the Tunisian model could be a good example. Tunisian women are privileged. They are, thanks to the tradition of women, we have influence on neighboring countries. Let me go back to our history. Women have contributed to the construction of my country. They have also helped us to gain democracy. Nobody will forget how those dozens of thousands of women were involved in the revolution. They peacefully helped to draw attention to the very first democratic local elections in 2018. That will go down in the history of the Arab world as a wonderful example of a breakaway of the past. It was the very first time that a woman was elected as a mayor, myself, of Tunisia. That shows how people trust the governance and are willing to change the established customs. And that was the very first time that a woman was elected. I would also like to talk about the new governance role here and the mobilization of women in Tunisia. The new electoral code in Tunisia has guaranteed equal representation horizontally and vertically. That means that women are strongly represented in elected councils. Young people also are involved in new municipal councils. I'm the youngest one. Horizontal and vertical parity, that is equal representation of men and women, have allowed us to have local councils with 48% women. 20% of those women are elected by the councillors and the mayors. Despite that, with the percentage and presence of women in the local councils, we are still proud of achieving these figures, I think you can see that we are now competing with countries that have longer history for emancipation of women. Women, of course, have to use their influence to try and offset the situation, because we have the ability to be able to make society progress. Let me stress, with regard to the issue of equality in power, with regard to wages, the working code is important. Let me make some remarks about the importance of women in our society today. When the crisis is hitting the world hard, it is important for governments to show that they can do what they say. They can have unity. They cannot do this without the influence, the help of women. I would also like to talk about how we can act with the help of women in political life. The whole of society can take advantage of our own skills as women. We have an ability there. We have power because we have a humanistic side. We have sensitivity. I think our strength can be used for the benefit of all. My third remark is about the respect of different cultural communities with regard to the equality of women and diversity of men and women. This is important. Solidarity, too. These are all values that women uphold. We need to disseminate these values around us, and it's important for us to have the capability to reduce the potential violence that can be in our society. My last remark for you is a word about governance and our fight against corruption. Let me repeat that we have a conception of governance, a way of doing things, and we know that corruption is not part of what we do. Now that the situation has changed, there are 2 laws that will be adopted, but we also changed the way people do things, and that is why we are taking a strategic vision involving long-term education and, of course, governance in our city. Of course, empowerment of women is part of this, and we have several projects for women in our city to ensure that women can be a focus of interest. We want to encourage women to find solutions for themselves and for other women. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Vous avez mis l'accent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You have stressed important things, but you have not underlined how important your role has been with your strength and your clarity. You've talked about governance, about participation in government, local in this case, but in general, in politics, so necessary in terms of mobilization, salaries, work-family balance, covering these questions and governance questions. I know this is a subject that we have to continue working on.
We have spoken in different languages. We have spoken about many different topics, but I think we have given a very united message. The empowerment of women and girls must remain a priority. We are not there yet. COVID has taken us backwards, and we need to be very decisive, very careful, very determined at the next steps we will build at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, from politics, from cooperation, from leadership, from governance, from the economy to the law, from all these places, let's just say that today we begin a partnership that will make a priority to make sure we advance, we look forward, and we do not accept anymore that we just stand still or move backwards. Muchísimas gracias a todas.
Thank you all very much. This needs to be our requirement in launching Focus Africa 2023 to continue making progress in equality for women and girls, and not falling behind or back, and making and advancing together, men and women, Africa and Spain, with the aim of placing women and girls where they deserve. The place that there is being offered to them. Their rights are the rights of all. Thank you to Monique.
Thank you, Shirley. Gracias, María Teresa. Gracias a todos y a todas, y hasta pronto.
Thank you all very much, and I'll see you soon.